so this is cool because I think, as you saw in some tweets this morning, um, I've tried to do this before, and I get very few people who want to come on who disagree with me, unless it's on a topic where it's we kind of agree on the same thing, but the solution or getting to it is the difference, right? And I I guess the word I would use is I taunt people at times who I think are just being trolls.
Yeah, you
And
got me.
yeah, and there are troll behaviors, and I mean you can look at their accounts and know, like, there's a big thing of 2009 accounts that were basically sold, and people are using them to troll, and they're paid trolls, and you can see they've got, like, 10
Yeah,
followers since
you saw
2009.
that example that I sent you. It was some guy in
Yeah,
India sending out tweets. I can't even recall what the tweet was about. I think I recall it was a Republican tw-
yeah, it was
doing tweet,
conservative, certainly conservative, but and he was in India.
and yeah, and he was in India claiming that he was paying taxes in the U.S. And I was like, this is what a bot looks like.
Well, now see, I was curious as to why you chose me, or why you chose Ricardo here. I'm not even a particularly political poster normally. Most of my page pertains to my music
Right.
or other people's music. Um, so yeah, I was just curious of why you picked me, why you targeted me that day.
I don't know. I mean, it must have been a post that I saw that I commented on. I mean, I'd have to go back because I don't recall.
Yeah,
Well,
mine I see the logic. Sorry to interrupt here, Shane.
no, go ahead.
Mine I see the logic. So mine I do tweet often on Trump's Twitter, basically because, well, it is public and what he says affects the entire world. It's that simple. It affects the entire
So
world.
Right.
And I commonly reply or tweet whatever back to him. And the reality is, no, I don't have followers. I have like 20 people that follow my Twitter account, and most of them are either friends or random people that I followed and they followed back for some odd reason.
Right.
I have Stephen Fry on my account, which I have no idea why he'd want to follow me. I'm honored. uh, but so I can understand where you're coming from, where you think, oh, this guy has an account since 2008 or whatever. He only has 20 followers. He must be a bot. Yes, I can see the logic there, but
Well, it also
it's not
depends on the
always like that.
content being tweeted by that account,
Yeah.
right? So,
Well, I can tell you what you commented on in my case.
what was it?
I commented on one of Trump's tweets where he posted a chart of testing, coronavirus testing in the
That's what it
world,
was. That's
and
what it
Yeah, that's
was.
the same one. Yeah.
and America was number one on that chart. So what I did, from the exact same website and
Right.
page
Right.
that he posted his chart, I just posted the two that were directly underneath it from the same page.
Right.
And then you and a couple other people told me that that's misinformation and I'm spreading false information. I'm using the same website
No.
and
I
charts that he used.
Yeah, I don't think if I came across that way, that's not the way I meant to come across. I think what I said is, I think I now remember. One was a chart of, like, just kind of gross testing numbers, not per capita.
Right.
The other chart was per capita.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you might have jumped in on a discussion where people were saying, well, oh my God, we had 30,000 cases yesterday. We're still identified. Like we had 30,000 more. They were equating positive tests with, like, an infection rate, right? So my point was, I think in this stream, if we're testing more and more people every day, and we continue to see 30,000 positives, that says that the infection isn't growing, right? Or we could probably assume or deduce that the infection isn't growing because we're looking at a larger sample, right? Got a bigger denominator, but the numerator is staying the same. That's good news, right? And And so if you're looking at per capita rates and you're looking at gross testing rates, you're not you can't compare the fact that Iceland tested 80% of their people and say, well, we should be testing 80% of our people because they got a population of 382,000 people or something like that. So I think
Yeah,
that's
but you have to remember the size of the economies as well. Yes, they do have like 300,000 people. U.S. has 330 million people, but the U.S. also has a comparative economy for that and should be able. Like it goes back to what I said. Trump is constantly saying America is the greatest country in the world. America has the best healthcare, best doctors, best scientists, best everything. But then you can't say all this and then go back and say, oh well, we can't do all that testing because it's not
Well,
realistic.
that's
It
one of
doesn't
my.
make sense.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That was pretty much it. It doesn't make sense if you say everything's the best there, but then you can't keep up with the per capita of other countries. And let's
That's
be clear,
been
the only thing
that's
that
been one of
counts
my
here is the
biggest
per
issues.
capita.
That's been one of my biggest issues with the U.S. response to the coronavirus is we have the resources, we have the money, we have the infrastructure. There's no reason that it should have been handled as badly as it was. There's no excuse for it. For us to be leading the world in deaths and cases is ridiculous. We have the money, we have the resources. Why aren't we using it?
Like one of the problems I see in America is a lot of people are wanting to open up the economy again because they don't have money. And honestly, this doesn't make sense to me. Ireland, a tiny country by comparison, with a tiny economy by comparison, and people that have been laid off are getting paid every single week. It's that simple. There's a check. It's not even a check. It's transferred to your account every single week
from the government.
from the government.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Now I understand people saying, "Oh, that's socialism, this and that." But look, it helps people. People need food on the table. Like one of the things they did here is, for example, mortgages can be frozen for 3 months while this is happening. Mortgages and loans. It's not just mortgages. Mortgages and any other kind of loan can be frozen for 3 months.
car loans, personal
Yeah.
loans, right?
Yeah. Perfectly.
I don't see any reason why. I don't see any reason why we couldn't and shouldn't do that. And I think there's been. I don't know all the details of the CARE Act. I mean, I got it on my laptop. I've been through it. I've looked at it. Um, the the challenge we're getting here, or the requests we're getting here are, well, we should just cancel all that debt, not just put a moratorium on it or not allow interest to accrue, but to cancel it entirely.
No, that doesn't make sense.
People
That
are
doesn't make
trying
sense.
to take
No.
people on the left, like you've probably heard of AOC. I mean, everybody's heard of AOC. Is trying to
I
say
think that's the
Alexandria,
senator, right?
uh,
Or
House
representative or something.
representative, yeah,
Yeah.
from New York, the gal from New York. They're trying to take this opportunity to implement policies that they believe in under the guise of doing it to as a response to this virus crisis. And that, to me, it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's
No, that I
why would you
disagree
do
with.
that?
Look, somebody is buying a house. You can't all of a sudden a disease comes in and you cancel the mortgage completely. No, that's not right. What you can do is pause it so that if the person is having difficulties, you pause it because that interest is still there. The interest is still growing. Okay,
Right.
and the same thing here. The all the loan payments are paused, but the interest is still there. Okay, the bank's still getting money. The only thing that gets pushed out is the date of when the loan actually finishes payment.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Okay, so and that's perfectly viable. Canceling loans? No, absolutely not. You
Right.
bought something, you asked for money, whatever it was, you asked
Right.
for it. You have to pay it back.
So I'd go so far as to say, I could see saying no interest. I mean, this is a cascading thing, right? So because
I wouldn't even go that far because the interest gets spread out over the further months, and it's not that big. We're talking like 3 months, 3-4 months.
right, and
Okay,
interest
we're not
rates are
talking
pretty
about
low.
huge.
Yeah.
we're not talking about huge amounts of interest. It's not something. If somebody can afford a loan, they can afford a little bit of
Right.
interest being added on for a couple months.
So a conservative
Okay.
is willing to give up the interest, and the liberal, I think I'd say you're probably more liberal than I am in terms of your
Oh, I'd say
politics,
so.
right? You're willing to pay the interest, so that's reasonable. I mean, I understand that. Um, I think how would I put this? I don't. I understand the Canadian banking system because I lived in Canada for a number of years. In Ireland, how many banks do you have?
Oh, geez, I don't know, 10 plus. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
but it's
I'm
not
not
like a
too familiar.
thousand, or it's not like
Oh
three
no, no, you
hundred.
wouldn't have
Okay,
that many. No.
so that's the difference in our financial system. We have thousands of financial institutions, right?
But it would it's a straight across rule though that you're implementing. You're saying, okay, we pause loans. That's it. That's all that's happening. You're pausing the loans. Everything else works as normal. You're simply not going to be taking payments for 3 months.
Right. No, I understand that. I'm just saying that for us, I would not be surprised. I mean, I've seen things like this in Canada where they have like five major banks or had like five major banks. It's like the banks would get together and say, "Okay, we're going to do this." Right? So it was no disadvantage competitively to any one bank, right?
But
The
it shouldn't
spread.
be the banks doing this. It should be the government telling the banks to do this.
Well,
That's the thing here. The government should be telling the banks, look, we're in a crisis. As of now, all loan payments are paused for 3 months. Or you can continue with the ones that can afford to pay it, but if anybody requests to pause payment, you allow it, which is what's happening here. There's people that are continuing to pay their loans because they're working from home, they're still getting paid, et cetera, that kind
I
of
think
thing.
I might have
so
lost you guys.
uh, Shane, your video is paused. You may want to try to come back in if you can hear us.
Now, the reason I think this kind of thing is so important is because if people are in financial difficulties, then you have what's happening in the U.S., where you have massive protests of people that want to go back to their jobs and
Right.
go up to their local governments or whatever and protest, and they're right to do so because they don't have money.
Right.
Okay, they are. Or I shouldn't say they're right to do so. I can understand their logic. Okay, I think they're putting themselves and everybody else in danger by doing it, but I can understand their logic. They don't have money; they need to feed their kids. Okay,
Right.
simple logic.
So here's something that just came to me that um, may be the difference between Ireland and the U.S. Okay, so I have a tendency to believe that we have a very corrupt government in Washington. There's very okay. Shane's coming back in here.
Hey, sorry, don't know what happened there. I lost
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
No
Cool.
worries.
Um,
So where
so
were we?
so we were talking about this loan forgiveness, and Shane went on to talk, or Ricardo went on to talk a little
Oh.
bit more about uh, protests here and the reasons why and all that. So it's interesting. We had this CARE Act, and we've had three or four iterations of legislation from the government. Um, the interesting thing is that I I don't know why, Ricardo, they didn't put in some kind of a moratorium or hiatus on payments driven by the government to ease the burden on people. Okay. And it looks like that wasn't even a partisan request. Okay. And here's the interesting thing. We have a left, we have folks on the left, the Democrats, who part of their big constituency and where they get their money from are the big banks and the investment banks and the hedge funds and people like that. So the Democratic Party, which I heard an explanation the other day. It's a party that caters to the really, really poor and the really, really rich. And a lot of people don't understand that. So I'm thinking about this and I'm like, why didn't we do that? I mean, Ricardo's talking about this and this makes perfect sense. And I had heard it before. But as you're explaining it, I'm like, that seems pretty reasonable. And if everybody has to do it, it kind of, and if you did it corporation to corporation as well. So corporations had debt with another corporation because mortgages get sold off and transferred to other people,
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
So if you just basically in the system said, we're going to halt those payments, and everybody has got the same rules. I'm no economist, so I don't know in large numbers what that would mean, but that seems reasonable. And I think why I was just thinking, why did we not even? I don't even think we considered that. And then I'm thinking, okay, I know why. Conservatives want a smaller government and would like people to figure out a way to figure that out themselves. And you're thinking liberals would want, the Democrats would want to solve the problem with government. And they didn't. And I've got to believe it's because they didn't want to offend, if you will, the people that are some of their largest funders.
I won't speculate because I have no idea.
Yeah.
Personally, I think this is a problem with America. There's too much speculation. Okay, this isn't you in particular. It's just in general. You notice that there's people that carry out too much speculation, and that speculation, 2 or 3 people down the road, becomes fact.
So why do you think that happens? And why do you think it happens here? I mean, does it happen in Ireland too?
What
the speculation and the questioning and the conspiracy theories?
I think it happens all over the world. I honestly think it's happening more and more all over the world.
This is where I'd like to chime in. One of my biggest problems with everything that's going on right now is all these conspiracy theorists, all these tinfoil hat people out here that have all these theories that this virus isn't as serious as everybody says it is, or it's not as deadly as everybody says it is, and that we should all just go back to life. You know what I mean? And I think that's a very dangerous point of view.
Who's saying that, though?
Lots of people. You get these anti-lockdown protesters, like the guys you have out in Michigan.
Well, Mark, here I'm going to upset you a little bit, but I'll say the first person who said it was Donald Trump.
I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, but not so. So I've never heard him say just open things up willy-nilly and go back to normal. He's never said that.
What he did do that was kind of odd to me is when he released his plan to reopen America. In his plan, he stated that it was on the governors. It was up to the governors to decide how to reopen their states.
I'll want to chime in on this.
And then 2 days later, he started releasing tweets saying, liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia. He is telling people to ignore the plan that he just released 2 days before. I don't understand.
So I have a couple of points on here. The first one that I was referring to, where Donald Trump was the first one to pretty much say it wasn't that bad. So here's a tweet from March 9th that he released. So last year, 37,000 Americans died from the common flu. It averages between 27,000 and 70,000 per year. Nothing is shut down. Life and the economy go on. Okay. He goes on to say, at this moment, there are 546 confirmed cases of the coronavirus with 22 deaths. Think about that. Now, this is clearly, Mark, you have to agree with me. This tweet clearly downplays the seriousness of the situation. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I don't know if it downplays, but it's certainly compared to what we know now, it's incorrect.
Exactly. So, and we know that in rallies he was saying, "Oh, this is just like the flu kind of thing." Now, I'm paraphrasing. I don't have exact quotes, but there's several videos of him downplaying again the entire situation. And this is where it comes in, where you now have people who have got it in their heads from the first time that they heard him that it's just a flu. It's nothing big. It's not important. Okay? It doesn't matter what he says now because they've already put it in their heads.
Right.
Okay? And this whole thing of the state responsibility. Now, here's one small bit that bothers me. So initially, regarding equipment, and I'll get to the opening and closing of the states in a second. Initially, regarding equipment, he came out saying the shelves were empty, there was no equipment, and the testing was inadequate, and it was Obama's fault. Okay, you remember that, I'm sure.
Right.
Okay. Now he's turned around and said that the equipment, the testing is the governor's responsibility. So, which is it? Is it the president's responsibility or is it the governor's?
Okay, so this is an example of something that I'd like to talk about. It seems like we're in an either or world right now. It's either choice A or choice B. There's no choice in the middle.
I'm perfectly happy with the choice C, where the government helps the
Well,
states,
yeah, but let me
which is
just
yeah.
I think it comes down to, so in real life there is that continuum of choices and behaviors and practices, but I think what I think we need to separate the analysis of what's happening from what's actually happening, because everybody has an agenda. And so uh, he said the shelves are bare. So people are saying, well, that's your fault. So he says, I'm going to go fix that problem. And he goes and rattles the cages of GM and Ford and all these suppliers. And all of a sudden, we've got ventilators flying in from all over the place. And then it's like, so he fixes that problem. And now it's number of beds. And so he fixes that problem, and now it's testing. It seems to me that people can't separate the fact that they don't like his personality from what's actually happening on the ground. And here's some interesting, like, something interesting to think about. I saw the stats, and I could probably go in them on my phone, but people are like, the press, our press, is very, very negative toward Ron DeSantis and the way he's handled things in Florida. And our press makes Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, look like he's a hero. If you look at the number of infections in New York and the number of deaths, and you look at the number of infections in Florida and the number of deaths, they pale in comparison. And people are criticizing DeSantis for opening up Florida. They've got like I'm going to say it's like 1/30th the number of deaths that New York City has. And you would think that Ron DeSantis was the biggest bandit in the world if you read stuff in our press. And so I don't really do that anymore. I mean, yes, I do, but I go to multiple sources and pull this data in and figure out for myself who's zooming who. No pun
So
intended.
I can give you an example here. So Florida yesterday had 826 new cases, obviously due to testing, etc. But there are 826 new cases.
Right.
Okay. So when you have a state that it has a number comparable to any country in Europe on a daily basis, right? Any country in Europe regularly has somewhere between 500 1,000 new cases, and they're staying closed because that is a still alarmingly large number of new cases for a comparable area. Okay, so I can understand why people wouldn't want to open Florida yet, because that's a lot of new cases coming out.
I know I'm not happy that we're opening.
Well, but you don't have to see. This is the other thing. It's like we're looking at this as open, I'm going to get infected, or closed, I'm good. You don't have to go out and change your behavior if you choose not to.
Well,
Hang on,
I do.
don't you?
I do. I have a family to provide for, and I don't know how familiar you are with the unemployment situation here in Florida, but it's not good.
It's not good anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, as far as they're not paying people. I filed for unemployment back in early March. I never got it. You know what I mean? I'm still waiting. So I have no choice but to go back to work. I have 3 children at home, and I take care of my elderly parents. I have
And I can
responsibilities.
give a different scenario as well. People working from home, if the state is reopened, those people will start having to go into the office where there's higher propensity for getting infected. Whereas
Yeah,
if the state stays closed, they can work from home.
right. But we're also seeing many businesses that have said, even though the state is opening up, we don't want you to come into the
Oh,
office.
and
We want you to
that's a
continue to
very good
work
thing.
remotely. I'm just trying to find the stats from. Uh,
No,
But
I have them here if you want. So for Florida, you currently have 1,600 dead. So
New York is what?
extremely unfortunate, but it's a relatively low number. New York has 26,000 dead.
Right.
Okay. That said, you also have to compare populations, which I'm sure Florida has a much lower population.
No,
I'm
they're
guessing
almost
haircut.
exactly the same.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah, that's why I want to find the tweet that I think I retweeted it. So I'm sorry, I would have had another screen up here, but I moved. Uh,
That said, though, there's also the population density, which New York City alone would be complicated, I guess.
New York City would be complicated, but Florida does have some big cities like Miami and Tampa and places like that. But I mean, New York is a big state. Um,
Yeah.
Square footage or square mileage wise, it might be as big or probably not bigger than Florida, but close, I would think.
Well, plus I don't know if you guys have ever visited New York, New York City.
Just in
It's
passing.
shoulder to shoulder,
Airport.
like Ricardo said,
Right,
density.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
and that's got to make a big difference.
Right, and so that should make a difference to me. That should make a difference in how you treat either a state or counties as you're opening up. I mean, in Ohio, we shouldn't be penalized because New York is that dense. We
No,
also
like,
shouldn't be penalized that New Yorkers, in large part, kind of ignored the social distancing thing for a long time. I don't know if you saw the pictures of the people out standing in the park, crawling over each other to take pictures of the Comfort of the Mercy, whichever of the hospital ships that came into the harbor to be there. I mean, that was the head of the. I mean, that was the midst of the pandemic. That's when Cuomo was saying we're not going to have enough ventilators and we need hospital beds. And Trump said, I'll send you a ship. And he sent in the ship, and they're all out. They're all out crawling over
following
each
your
other.
logic, I'll give you another example. You take, for example, Wyoming, North Dakota. These are states
Right.
that have very low number of cases, very low number of deaths. Now, personally, I'd say they should be open. Okay.
Right.
However, they should be open, but their borders should be closed.
Right.
Okay. It makes absolutely no difference for them to open the state if they allow anybody from New York, from Florida, from
Right.
California to come into the state. They could literally just open everything up and wait for the infection to come in.
Well, you should have read the stories about Ron DeSantis wanting to do that about people from New York and Florida, because a lot of people who live in New York have homes, second homes in Florida.
They shouldn't specify states. They should just say we're open, borders are closed. Period. End of story.
Well, if I'm in Ohio and we have an infection rate and the same numbers as Wyoming, why shouldn't I be able to go to Wyoming?
So how do they check the driver's license at the border to see if you're from Ohio or somewhere else?
This right here is the difference between Americans and Europeans, right? This is the difference between conservatives and liberals or progressives. You're totally okay with the government saying, "Hey, you can't do this." We're not.
I will say this. Like I stated, in my house, I have 3 young children, and I have 2 disabled elderly people. So I'm literally the high risk group. You know what I mean? My household is the high risk group. And
I'm 61. I'm high risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So am I okay with sitting in my nice, comfy house where I have television and food and all the amenities I need? Am I okay with sitting here for a few weeks to reduce the risk to my family? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
You see, Mark, going back to
what you guys again.
That's okay, Shane. The video. There you go. You're back.
Now, Mark, going back to what you were saying. So, for example, let's take some practical examples here. Let's say somebody from Ohio has been stuck in New York, or they've been living there for the past 6 months, whatever, and now they decide to go into Wyoming.
Right.
And basically, he's an Ohioan, but he's traveling into Wyoming, spreading the
Right.
disease.
No, I understand the complexity of all this. I mean, it's going to be, I mean, solutions like that, Ricardo, I think you would admit are, they can't be 100%. It will never be 100%. There will always be people that slip through or do what they
Well, but
shouldn't do.
that's the problem. In this scenario with COVID-19, you have to have a 100% solution, because otherwise all you'll have is reoccurrences of the viruses in 2 months. So yes, Wyoming, Iowa could probably open up, but you need to close the borders for individual states to all traffic.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that in terms of the science behind it and the logic. I just think it's going to be virtually impossible to enforce, right? I mean, you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of miles of border around each of those states and multiple roadways, and then you've got rail in some areas and airline travel and all the rest. I mean, it that would be challenging.
But then the best solution in that scenario is to keep the states closed as long as possible to reduce, to try to reduce the number of infections that are already existing.
Well, people are still going to get infected. I mean, that's the dirty little secret here. The dirty little secret is probably 80 to 90% of the population at some point is either is going to have the coronavirus, either symptomatically or asymptomatically.
Correct. The key here is that the number of infections has to be lower than the capacity of the healthcare system.
Right. The number of bad infections. Correct. Right.
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
why we're smoothing the
critical,
curve.
the critical
Right.
issues.
Right.
The critical, the critically sick need to be a number lower, and I mean much lower than the capacity of the healthcare system.
Right.
You can't have it at capacity, because
No.
then if another surge peaks, then you have a bunch of people that have nowhere to go.
Right.
So it has to be much lower than the capacity of the healthcare system.
Right.
Okay, and that's what was not happening in New York. Okay, they were very close to capacity. They weren't full by any means, but if another surge had come in, you'd have a bunch of people simply wouldn't be able to get any health care.
And the other thing is some of that was amplified by the press. It wasn't everywhere in New York City. It wasn't everywhere. I mean, there were a few hospitals that were absolutely overwhelmed. What I don't understand is why they weren't better managing that volume and taking people elsewhere. There were other hospitals nearby. I think what would you call it? I hate to use the word postmortem in a situation like this, but when you do a postmortem analysis on what happened here, we're going to find that it was badly mismanaged at the local and state level as well as the federal level. I mean, there were a lot of things we could have done better. So if getting back to the press and the way they kind of put their spin on this, I haven't heard a single question in the press of any governor to say, what was your plan before this pandemic became visible to you? What was your pandemic plan? I'd like to see, if I were someone in the press, I actually think we should do this as a kind of a blue ribbon panel study. We should get some honest brokers together and require a review by every state of their preparedness plans, right?
I agree,
Right.
but there should also be a federal review of the federal preparedness plan.
Absolutely, but I mean, you know how these things work, right? I mean, the most of the work gets done at the local level. The next amount of work gets done at the state level, and the federal government is there to back that up, right? And we're looking at this. I believe we're looking at this in the U.S. as if the federal government should have solved this problem. And
I don't say solved, but it should have coordinated, and that's the problem we see. Like we saw it on the news that you had states basically competing for equipment. Okay, they were competing to bid with the sellers, which were normally in China or wherever. They were competing to buy equipment. Now this shouldn't happen. I'm sure you can agree with that.
right. But what many so there was so much. See the challenge for you being where you are unless you really get into the alternative sources of information and really dig deep, and maybe you have, but I don't think a lot of people do because they don't have the time. Uh, so that so there were a lot of governors saying we're competing with the federal government and they're outbidding us. And
Well,
Trump
no,
said,
you had 2 points. You had them competing with the federal government, but also competing with each other.
right.
And that's where the main problem was. It wasn't the federal government that was the main problem because the federal government was only buying a small amount for its stockpile.
Okay.
The main
So
problem came in where they were competing against other
right.
states.
So why were they competing against other states?
Because you go to a supplier, that supplier can only supply so many. So it's highest bidder comes first. That's
So
capitalism.
so those states that were complaining about that were unprepared for this.
Everybody was unprepared. Trump himself has said there was no way to prepare for this.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, look.
We
So
can't
so
repeat
so
the states.
but this is my point. There's this finger pointing going on, and there are a lot of people to blame.
Well, but that's part of the point, though, because you can't have Trump saying that everybody was unprepared, including the federal government, but then pointing the finger at the governor saying you were unprepared.
Well, because they're
Everybody was
pointing the
unprepared.
finger at the government and him saying, you aren't helping us, you're not doing your job. And he's saying, no, you didn't do your job either. I mean, sure, we have issues, but you didn't do your job either. But all
Okay,
we hear in
I'm
the
gonna go
media.
back to a famous quote now. I'm gonna go back to a famous quote. I don't take responsibility at all. You've heard that one, I'm sure.
I have.
Okay. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't think anybody has to take responsibility for the virus except in the fact that it spread except the Chinese. Okay?
Okay.
I don't
I was
remember
going to say so.
I don't remember the context of what he said that. If I'm sure if you asked him and said, "Hey, if you went back, would you prefer not to have said that?" He'd probably say, "Hell yeah."
Well, that's the thing here. Like my main gripe with Trump himself, okay, is how he says things. It's not just what he says; it's how he says it, and it's this whole thing of him not assuming responsibility. Amusingly, in April 26, 2013, he posted this tweet: "To be in charge, you have to take responsibility. You have to instill confidence. It's like being a conductor. Set the tempo." This was him writing on Twitter in 2013. Okay. In 2014, during the whole Ebola thing, he said President Obama has a personal responsibility to visit and embrace all people in the U.S. who contract Ebola. Okay. Now, obviously, I'm not saying he should go and embrace everybody, but he is saying that the president has the responsibility.
But
Rousseau himself,
you do realize that we flew patients from Africa to the United States to treat them.
in
That
case,
Obama brought the
but
Ebola
in that
virus
particular
here
scenario,
intentionally.
and in that particular scenario, it was relative to the October 24th tweet he put in that if this doctor who so recklessly flew into New York from West Africa has Ebola, then Obama should apologize to the American people and resign. Now, note this doctor who flew in from West Africa to New York after being in West Africa, Kenya, I think it was, treating patients for Ebola, was an American citizen. Okay, and this goes back to the whole thing of the borders closing with China, where 40,000 people came back
Right.
in, and he said, "Oh, it's okay, they're Americans." This guy was also an American.
But they were being quarantined.
Were they?
Mhm.
All of them?
Mm-hmm.
The understanding I saw is that not.
No, I'm
everyone
pretty
was
sure. I'm
quarantined.
pretty sure they were all being
There
quarantined
were a lot
after
of scenarios where
after a certain
all they
point.
would do was
Right.
was take temperatures. If you had a temperature, yes, you'd be quarantined. But if you didn't have a temperature, nothing would
I
happen.
think at first that's the way it was, but after I think they realized we've got to quarantine people.
Yeah.
But here's like my only response to that is it's really easy in hindsight to say we made all these mistakes. There were mistakes made everywhere.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Look, everybody
And
makes mistakes, but the president has to assume responsibility. That's his job. That's literally his job.
So I'm more concerned about results than what people say. Okay.
No, but the problem is if he doesn't assume responsibility, he can't fix it because he'll say it's somebody else's fault. Then it's that person's job to fix it. Do you see my point? It's like this
Well,
whole thing with
I've been
opening
in
and closing
management
states.
most of my life, and when you're in charge of something, the buck stops with you. If something goes right, it's because of you. If something goes wrong, it's because of you.
Absolutely,
Right.
And that's where he is.
So I ran, up until recently, I ran a company of 800 people. I just sold 90% of it, which is why I have the time to do this kind of thing in the middle of a workday. Right. And I totally agree with you, Shane. Totally agree with you. But for me, taking that responsibility, I'm saying it in my head. I'm letting my people know it by my actions. But I don't have the press out there criticizing every move I make, whether it's good or bad, and never giving me credit for anything good I do and accentuating everything bad I do. And that's what I see. And
well, you and I aren't going to disagree on press. The media in this country is ridiculous on both sides. Everybody has an agenda.
Right.
There is no such thing as real journalism in America.
Correct.
That doesn't exist.
I agree. We definitely agree on that.
I agree
but my point is that, so see, Ricardo, so I think that during the Obama administration, Obama never admitted to making a mistake, or like in interviews, making a mistake or wanting to take something back. There may have been like one time it was like, and I think in that interview, he made a point of saying, I don't usually do this. And I think the gal, it was a woman that was interviewing him. I forget who it was, Leslie Mitchell or something like that, kind of laughed and said, yeah, we kind of checked and this would be the first time. I don't think it's that Obama or Trump don't want to take responsibility. They just don't want to put it out there as a soundbite that's going to be taken by these folks and amplified. And
but he puts out the soundbite when he says that he's not taking responsibility.
No. But to say it is my responsibility, they're going to be all over him one way or the other, right?
Agreed.
So,
but that's part of it. That's part of being the president of the United States.
Right. It's part of being the president of the United States, and how you react to that, and how you, like, the mainstream media in our country, and I'm not so sure it's different in the UK, from what I've seen. Extremely polarized.
Ireland.
Extremely. I know you're in Ireland, but Ireland is part of the UK, though, right?
No, absolutely not.
So you're no longer part of the UK.
Not since 1916. Northern Ireland is part of the UK.
Okay. I got you. I got you.
But not since Brexit, right?
With
I'm not familiar with what I was going.
No, they're still part of the UK. It's just the entire UK is leaving Europe.
Gotcha.
So England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland.
Right. Okay. I forget you got the two Irelands.
It's like North
there.
and South Virginia.
Yeah. Except Virginia and West Virginia. North and South Dakota.
Oh, yeah.
Where were we on this? So I think that I believe that what Trump has really thrown the mainstream media curveball. He said, you guys don't matter to me anymore. And the reason you don't matter is because I can communicate. Presidents prior have had to communicate to get to the masses, had to communicate through the media. And he's saying, I'm not doing that. I'm using Twitter. I'm going directly to people. I'm using social media. And
I'm going to pick up on that in a second.
And whether you like it or not, I'm doing that. Rather than saying, okay, they didn't like it. Rather than saying, okay, we're just going to have to deal with that. But instead of being fair and reasonable and balanced and looking at all sides, they said that's an attack on us, because we're counting on him for a lot of viewers and a lot of advertising revenue. And if that goes away, so they had to find a way to make a story, and their story is going to be about everything
There's that
negative about
speculation
him.
again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would. Here's what I would say. You could say speculation. You could also say that's my hypothesis based on a lot of data points that I've picked up on over
You see, the
12 or
Now,
15
now
years.
what Mark is saying is true, but it exists on both sides. Here in America, on the left, you have CNN, MSNBC, CBS to some extent. On the right, though, you have Fox, you have Breitbart, OAN. Um,
But if you look at the
so,
size of those, what people would consider to be conservative, like news outlets, and then you look at the liberal or progressive, and you look at
Fox is the largest news network
now,
in America.
now, right?
okay, well, we'll agree that all the news channels are pretty much
Crap.
Uh, that said, Trump has a direct, and we're talking a direct line to the public. And I'm not just talking about the American public. He has a direct line to the world.
Right.
Okay. When he does his press conferences, everybody sees it, unfiltered. That's what he said. Okay.
Right.
And now we have a president who, let's be clear, I have no problem. I might have some really crazy idea, okay, that I think might work, and I need somebody else to check it. I'm not going to go on Twitter or on Facebook or any other social media and say, hey, do you think this will work? No, I'll talk to that person directly. Okay, because it's such a crazy idea. I have no idea, and I don't want to look like an idiot. Okay, so to me, it boggles my mind when the sitting president of the United States of America talks about injecting people with disinfectant on a worldwide broadcast. And you cannot, you absolutely know there's people that are going to simply take him at his word and go and try it.
But that's
They
not
did,
what he said.
and a few people did.
That's not what
No,
he
what
said.
he
If
did
you
say
go if you
people
go
should
back
check.
and look at it, he was
Hang on, I watched it several times. Exactly what he said was he turned to Dr. Bricks and said, what about injecting a disinfectant or like do a cleaning? And he said, we should try to see if that'll work. Okay. He asked, I have
Right.
no doubts about that. He was asking a question.
No, but he wasn't suggesting you take Lysol and so here's the interesting thing.
You and I, look, let's face reality. You and I and Shane are intelligent people. We can see it for what it is. It's simply a comment thrown out in the air, amusing. Okay. It was just him speaking his mind, asking a question to see, look, would this work, kind of thing. We know this, but there are people in the world. I'm not just talking America. There's people in the world watching these broadcasts who will take it for what it is.
It took about 4 days after he said that. I believe it was in Arkansas, but it took about 4 days till somebody did drink some sort of cleaner because they interpreted that way, and
Okay.
that's the danger with a lot of the things that he comes out and says. 'Cause like
So
you said,
so
we're intelligent enough to realize that's not exactly what was being said, but there's a lot of people that aren't. And it's dangerous. You have to think about what you're saying when you're in a position like that where so many people are going to hear what you have to say.
It's like we're in positions of management. We can't turn around to one of our employees and tell them you're shit. You're sorry. I don't know if I can curse on this or not. But look,
you can do whatever you want.
You suck. Whatever. We can't talk like this to our employees. And the same thing goes for the president of the United States of America. He can't simply blurt out whatever he feels like to the public. He has to measure his words. He needs to know how to. It's called being presidential. Let's face it. He's got to have some class, and he's got to understand that he's speaking to a wide variety of people. And even if we just talk about America, he's still talking to a wide variety of people, wide variety of intelligent knowledge, etc. And he has to measure his words to his base. It's like a lot of his speeches are only to Republicans, and the reality is, Americans are Republicans, Democrats, Independents. He's got to be able to speak to everybody. The whole point of the president is that he's the president of America. He's not president of the Republicans. He's
Right.
president of America.
Yeah, but so let me just play devil's advocate because that's what I do. Why do you say he's speaking only to Republicans?
Because everything he says is, Democrats are doing this, Democrats are doing that, do nothing, Democrats. That's just how he talks. That's how he talks.
And his political opponents talk the same way about him.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And those messages.
But hang on. But his political opponents are not the president of the United States. He is. The president of the United States should be bipartisan for the intent of communicating to his people.
Right.
He can have whatever politics he wants, but when he's communicating to the people of the United States of America, he has to be bipartisan.
So you're suggesting he shouldn't criticize the Democrats?
And you're president. You're no longer Republican or Democrat. You're the president. You're American. You are the leader for all Americans, not just the red states, not just the blue states.
Shouldn't that be every politician, though, Shane?
Absolutely, it should be. The partisan divide in this country is ridiculous,
right.
And it's not just Trump's fault or the Republicans' fault. It's everybody.
Right. So why do you hold him to that standard? But let's say you haven't brought up Nancy Pelosi and want to hold her to that standard.
That's where I'm getting to right now. You have, for example, the House and Senate, and it's impossible for that country to pass any laws right now because anything that passes in the Senate gets rejected in the House. Anything that
and vice versa
passes in the House gets rejected in the Senate.
Right.
It's completely ridiculous. We saw that with the impeachment. I knew from day one that was never going to pass. It was impossible.
Yeah, and we're finding out now that there was absolutely no basis for it. None. I mean, did you see the documents that were released yesterday?
I haven't.
No. The day before? You need it if you have an interest in this, and I think you do.
I've moved. It's like I say, I'm in Ireland, so other than what affects the world, like in general, the minutia of the impeachment itself didn't really interest me.
Right.
I thought they were nitpicking, and there were other issues that they could have picked on, and I saw no reason why they wouldn't want to present the witnesses, both in the House and in the Senate. I don't know why they wouldn't want the opposing parties to be able to question them properly.
Because that's what people like you and I would like to see.
Well,
right.
But in both cases.
No, I understand. I don't disagree with you there. Right.
Like if you have a solid case, you present it. You have witnesses. They argue back and forth, etc. If it's a solid case, it's gonna win. If it's not a solid case, it's gonna fall flat.
Right.
It's that simple. And you let a proper due process preside.
Right.
And you had failures in that both in the House and in the Senate.
Significant.
Now, significant. Right. Although in the House, I will argue that in the House they allowed the witnesses to be present, even if it was for a short amount of time, whereas in the Senate there were no witnesses whatsoever.
But you also understand the process. That was supposed to be where they did the let's call it the police detective work, and then they're supposed to come present their case after that. Yeah. But you probably never read I think it was either 620 or 920, the rules that the House passed about that process in the House that Adam Schiff was running?
No, I heard it briefly, but I didn't read it.
So there is so much of this information that's out there and available. It's publicly available, but nobody has the time to go in and read it. Well, I did, and I went in and read it. And it basically said that the Democrats were going to pick all the witnesses and that the Republicans, the minority party, could suggest to them what witnesses they wanted, but they had to be approved by a majority of the committee, which was a majority Democrat. So the Republicans got none of the real witnesses that they wanted to have appear in front of that committee in those hearings. I mean, you've got if you read that, Ricardo, I would tell you, if you read it, you would say, This is a rigged game.
But everything about the entire thing was rigged, and
Right.
that's on all sides.
Right.
Let's be clear, that was on all sides.
Starting with the FBI doing its initial investigation. They made up the evidence to start the investigation, and we're going to see more and more documents now come out and evidence
Personally, I
about
thought
that.
it was ridiculous that people were talking about impeachment when he just went into office. And let's be clear, I do not like the man.
Right.
Okay, I do not like the man.
But I think you're a fair. You seem to be a fair person, a reasonable person.
I try to be. I try to be. I try to look at things on both sides because it's like I said, I don't have a bone to pick with the Republicans or Democrats or whatever. What I don't like to see is unbased theories or whatever, or
Right.
people ignoring facts, so to speak. If it's a fact, it's there. That's it. It's not going to change. There's no alternate fact or whatever. It's that's what it is. And people ignoring them for their own narratives just kind of annoys me. But like, there's a whole list of things that could have been picked to investigate. Like, personally, if I was in the House or the Senate or whatever, if I wanted to investigate, I'd go for quite simply, incompetence, and I'd go look for evidence of it. Okay, I wouldn't go picking a random phone call where that could be refuted very very easily.
Yeah, but incompetence isn't a high crime or misdemeanor.
Or
Right.
look,
And incompetence is a subjective thing, right? You can say that I'm incompetent because of the way I believe, right? And maybe you are, but I'm a pretty smart guy, right? So that's a subjective measure, and
so I'm gonna read you once again a tweet from Trump, June 4th, 2014. Are you allowed to impeach a president for gross incompetence?
right. I mean, imagine that.
I get you.
Imagine that, a politician contradicting themselves.
So no, I just found it amusing. That's
Yeah.
all. So yeah, look, there's a host of other issues. Like I kept hearing people going on Twitter complaining about his hair, complaining about Melania, complaining about this and that. It's like, guys, focus. There's more important issues. The phone call, yes, they could have gone with it, but they had enough time that they could have done a better investigation. Um, it's fact. That's all it is. They could have done a better investigation before bringing it at starting the impeachment procedures. Once the impeachment procedure started, they should have let everybody talk to the witnesses properly.
Yeah, they had to rush it though. They had to get it done.
That said, even if they had allowed the witnesses to be questioned by both sides properly, once it hit Senate, the Republicans weren't going to allow that to pass. And the reason I say
McConnell
that,
said before it even hit Senate,
exactly,
he wasn't
and
going to let it.
this is something that annoys me. You cannot go into a trial and say before the trial even starts that you're not gonna pass it.
But don't you believe?
Can you imagine a judge in a criminal trial going, you know what? This guy's guilty. I don't care what they say at the trial. This guy's guilty. I mean, you can't do that.
But don't you believe that? So you don't believe that it was predestined that they were going to vote and find him guilty? Like they were going to charge him essentially with those two counts?
Again, it's one of those things. There's what I believe and what I can prove. Okay.
Right.
I believe so. Yes, they were going to impeach him regardless. Okay. What can I prove? I can't prove that they had anything planned. However, I can prove that McConnell is his name, I think. McConnell did come and say that he was not going to let it pass, and there is the difference. With the House, yes, I believe they were going to do it, but there's no evidence that they had pre-planned it.
Well, let's just get back. Let's
on topic. Yeah.
No. Well, no. Let's look at this first of all, this process was not a legal process. It's a political process, right? It's not a legal process. It's a political process. The result of finding someone guilty of these impeachable offenses would have been you're out of office, right? So it's not it's just like you can't police in the United States, and I think in Ireland, because you're a common law country, can't go out and decide willy-nilly what the rules of evidence are, right? What rights a someone who they believe has committed a crime have and don't have. You can't change it, right? You can't change their right to discovery, their right to call witnesses and cross-examine, which is what happened with this House Resolution 920 or 620 in the House to begin with, right? So
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I agree with you completely.
So McConnell only did what they did. I mean, it's this tit for tat thing. That's what bothers me, right?
Absolutely.
This tit for tat thing.
It's a broken government. Right now you have Democrats do one thing, Republicans do another, vice versa, all day long.
Right.
And it's a broken system.
Right. Because it's totally corrupt.
Broken system right now.
Yeah, it's totally corrupt. I mean, if you look at what really is causing this, it's just the amount of corruption in our federal government is huge.
But do you accept that corruption exists on the Republican side as well?
Oh, it exists everywhere. Yeah, absolutely.
Like that, I have a long-held, and now here is, it's not really a theory. It's a belief. I have a very long-held belief that the main problem with the world is the possibility of politicians having a career.
Right.
It used to be that you volunteer to help in your tribe, like you volunteer to help manage who went fishing, who did the farms. It was a volunteer kind of work because you wanted to help your village
community.
Now this was a long time ago, obviously. Now, from the moment that official governments came up, and this goes as far back as Rome, you'd see that politicians would make a career out of it. And that's where the problem really starts, is
right.
From the moment somebody can make a career out of something, they can exploit that. Okay? I've made a career out of IT, which means I can exploit how IT works. I know what to do, what not to do, that kind of thing. And the same thing in any kind of career. Somebody in business trade would know how to exploit the stock market, for example, what to buy, what not to buy, how to trick other companies into buying stuff, that kind of thing. And the same thing goes with politicians. But politicians are, at the end of the day, civil servants, and it should not be possible for a politician to make a career out of it. I be able to run.
I totally agree.
You should be able to run. You do your term, it's over. You don't simply keep running for another role in politics, or like you see that, for example, I'm from Portugal, and you see guys there that they start out with, for example, you'd have a guy that's a mayor in one city. When his term's up, he goes and runs for mayor in another city, so on and so forth. Then when you get into upper government, you have one minister of defense, then he runs for minister of education, minister of health, etc., and so on. And they spend their entire lives in politics.
Right.
And you're seeing the same thing in the States, although in the States it's a little bit more fixed in that they can just remain senators their entire lives.
Right.
Okay?
So it's happening everywhere, and we have solutions available. The problem is the solutions that are available have to be voted upon, enacted, and implemented by the people who would lose, right? And so it's the reason I'm running, for senator. Now, people think it's nuts, right, that I'm going to run for senator. And I've got a primary, another Republican who's a sitting senator, Rob Portman in Ohio, who's what we would call a rhino, a Republican in name only. And I'm pretty much a nobody, right? I mean, I've never been in politics before at all. I'm kind of like Trump in that regard. I've never held office or anything like that. And in our corruption is not only at the federal level, but at the state level and the state party level. I mean, I signed up for like let's call it a boot camp for campaigning with the Ohio Republican Party. And they rescinded, like I signed up, it was an Eventbrite thing. I was ready to go, and then the Wednesday before they were having it, that weekend, they rescinded my invitation, and they wouldn't tell me why. And I hounded them, and I put it out on Twitter and all that. You can go back and check. But they don't want anybody that's going to disturb the status quo, right? So it's the reason I'm running, and I'm running to win. Trust me. But I'm going to run for one term because I think so. I can run for one term, raise money one time, campaign one time, serve for 6 years. The state of Ohio, people, the great citizens of our state, can go pick someone that hopefully will continue to do the kind of job that I would intend to do. And I don't have to be beholden to anybody because I'm going to run, I'm going to serve one term and then I'm out. I'll be 69 and I've got a grandkid and hopefully more grandkids by then. And I want to go do that. I don't really have a huge Jones to go to Washington and do this, except for the fact that I'm pissed off about what's going on. And I think it's somewhat disingenuous to bitch all the time and not do anything about it. So I'm going to give it a shot. So I've got this thing, I call it the Paquita plan, right? I hired a lot of marketing people to go find that name for me and spent a lot of money. But it's basically 5 things, Ricardo, and I'd be interested, with you, Shane, but also, Ricardo, because you have some experience with other governments. But I think we need term limits, okay? We need what I'll call hyper financial transparency. You should know going into office that you're going to be scrutinized as if you were getting a proctology exam or having a colonoscopy. That you should just be, that's going to happen to make sure we don't have any corruption. If you can't handle that or you don't like it, then don't run.
How do you feel about Trump refusing to show us tax returns and things like that, for example?
So here's what I would say. If there were a law requiring those tax returns, I'd say he should have to adhere to the law. The House and the Senate don't have to provide tax returns. I would say if they all did, he should do it. But all they want to do, Shane, is they're going to find ways to... people could look through my tax return and say, "Oh, you gave money to this, contributed to this." I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, right? At what minutia will go to try to criticize someone on one side or the other. I mean, I think everybody.
I think there it's not so much criticizing, but I think it would be worth looking at because there's so many people claiming that he's making money from being in office, that it is worth looking at for transparency. It's not even a question of looking for stuff; it's for transparency.
But I'd like to see Nancy Pelosi. Okay, so Nancy Pelosi has been, let's say, criticized or questioned for years about her family getting opportunities to partake in initial public offerings of companies, especially when there were big pops in the share price, when the closing price on day one was significantly higher than the opening price or what you paid for the stock. And she won't provide her tax returns. She's been there since 1995 or 1996. And
I agree. It should be for everybody.
So
finance. One of the big problems America has is lobbies.
Well, so that's the other thing. I think lobbying should be transparent and public. In other words, if you want to lobby, that's fine, but you've got to do it on webcam, live streaming, in a conference room, just like we would have a court proceedings where the public can see what's going on.
The entire concept of lobbying is part of what's breaking the system.
I don't disagree with you. So that's one of the five pillars.
Me, lobbying would be abolished completely. You want something done, you put in a request to your local representative like any other common citizen. That's it. It's done.
Yeah, well, they would say that that's their right? And I think we would have a hard time saying you can't do any lobbying. I'm not sure how you would distinguish between lobbying and just a citizen going forward and saying, I want this. I mean, I think there
shouldn't be a distinction. That's the point. They should be treated like any other citizen.
Right. And I can go meet privately with my representative. I can close the door and ask for things if I want to. My point with the lobbyist is if you're a registered lobbyist and you're trying to change legislation, you're trying to influence politicians to have them vote in a certain way or support your initiatives, that the American public should see what's being requested. There's no reason.
And what's being provided.
And what's being provided, but that comes down to the financial disclosure piece that we talked about, right? That comes down to that piece. The other thing I think we need is a line item veto. We waste a lot of money on people trading votes for largesse for their state, often to benefit less than. What would I call it? Less than projects beneficial to the entire state. Let's just put it that way. So I think we need a line item veto. So when a piece of legislation gets passed, it is passed for a reason. We're going to build something, or we're going to provide a social service to someone, and not have the social service bill give a tax breaks to hedge funds managers in New York City. I mean, it's just ridiculous if you look at our.
I agree with that, because what you have a lot of times is the reality is a lot of people play the long game. So you could have a lobbyist passing a legislation right now that seems harmless enough, and it doesn't actually impact much of anything, just some random new law coming in, and then 10 years down the road, they request something else, and then you see that actually creates a loophole in the previous law from 10 years ago.
Right.
Which they had planned for, because
right.
they're playing the long game, and that is entirely possible. So
but you can't play the long game if you're not a career. If we don't allow for career politicians, it's very difficult to play the long game.
You can if the ones playing the long game are the lobbyists. Because then they don't care who's there as long as they have somebody to pay.
Right. Which is why I think that lobbying needs to be public. And the other thing I think we need to outlaw is offshore accounts. I think that's the way a lot of money gets paid to people or to members of their family, and doesn't get caught. So we need to outlaw offshore accounts.
It shouldn't be possible to have offshore accounts, period.
Right.
My view is, if you're in government, you should be broke. It's kind of like monks. You go into a monastery, you give up all your worldly possessions. Government should be the same way.
I can't agree with that. I mean,
I'm not saying that you should get rid of all your possessions. Obviously, you have your house, etc., etc. But you shouldn't be going in for a financial gain.
Right.
There should be no financial gain from government, whether it be lobbyists,
other than your salary when you're there.
Exactly.
Right.
That's it. You get your salary, you go home, and that's it. And that's all you need.
So back in the day, as you were saying, I mean, what would happen is communities would find someone that they wanted to have go represent them in Washington. And typically, especially way back in the day, they were a farmer or a lawyer or someone, and it was going to be a sacrifice for them to go do that. And they were going to go do it and serve, and then they'd be like, okay, someone else is going to now go do this because I got to get back to running my farm or my law practice or whatever. And we've gotten so far away from that. It's just like someone said to me, well, what experience do you have that would make you a good senator? I'm like, well, what experience does a senator need to have to be a good senator? And it was like, well, you need experience in this and experience in that. And I'm like, why? Why do I have to be a lawyer? Why do I have to have a master's in public planning or something like that? Why? And we've been, this whole career, I contend that this whole career politician thing is we've been conditioned to think that you've got to go to an Ivy League school to be a senator or a representative, or you've got to have a political science degree and then a law degree. It's incredibly ridiculous. I mean, we really need. I mean, what are legislators doing? They should be looking at information and making decisions on how to make the country better or protect the country or whatever
I
from that
agree
information.
with you on that to a point. Let's be realistic. We can't have a guy with an IQ of 80 going into government and not even understanding the bills that are put in front of him.
Right.
We've been doing it for a few years.
Yeah. But no one's. I mean, but no one's. I mean, we've got a lot of that going on. But I mean, that's up to the. I mean, the constituents should be voting. I'm not suggesting that you're going to vote for unintelligent people or uninformed people. I'm just saying that.
Look, I'm the first proponent that a degree isn't necessary. I don't have a degree, and I'm at CTO level in the company I work for. So a degree isn't necessary for
Right.
anybody. Well, doctors, you'd probably want them to have a degree of some kind, but
Right.
He doesn't have a degree, but he's a man of the people. I want him to do this.
Right.
Yeah. So, look, you want somebody who has a head on their shoulders. No, you don't have to have an experience in social sciences, politics, or whatnot. It's probably helpful in some circumstances. Like if you're going to be talking to Russians and whatnot, you probably want to have some knowledge of what's going on over there. And you might actually get that in some of those political science degrees, because I'm sure they study other countries for that. But
I think I'm the outlier here. I kind of disagree with you guys. I feel like if you're going to be in Washington, at that high of a level of government, that you should have some political or law experience. I'm not incredibly political knowledgeable, and I could say that if I end up in Senate, it's going to be disastrous. It's a terrible idea. You shouldn't send me there. Get someone with experience. You wouldn't go to a doctor that doesn't have his MD. You wouldn't go to a lawyer that hasn't been to school for law. So why would you want a politician that doesn't know
different
history?
Scenarios, though. We're talking different scenarios because when you're running for Senate, you're based, and this is my view. Okay, when you're running for the House or the Senate, you're basically a representative of the people. So
Right.
you're basically just making sure that your people are satisfied and that the requests are coming in are being handled and that their needs are being provided for. Okay, and you don't necessarily need a degree for that. And by requiring that they have experience in politics beforehand, then it goes back to that they have to be a career politician because that's the only way you'd get experience.
That's what I was going to say. That says
I think
you're
some law knowledge, because you're making.
I wouldn't
laws.
disagree, but
you're
then
designing laws. You
Well,
should know law.
So hold on. Here's what many people don't know or don't think about.
You actually need to know law because that's what lawyers are for.
Yeah. So these
doesn't need to understand law.
Yeah, they have
because
staffs.
you hire lawyers.
Yeah,
to actually
they
check
have
if what you're doing is
staffs of people that do this for them. Each party has a staff. The Senate has a staff. Each senator has a staff. I mean, I think Rob Portman's office budget for his staff alone is like $4 million a year, right? Every senator, every House person has that, right? Those people whispering in Dianne Feinstein's ear or Jim Jordan's ear or whoever's ear, those are all the lawyers that are on their staff that write this legislation. They don't write it themselves. I mean, I'm sure there are some that, there's a lot of lawyers there, and they've probably, but many of them are probably not good lawyers, because if they were really good lawyers, they wouldn't be in the House or the Senate. They'd be practicing law and minting it.
Yeah, generally speaking, a senator or a representative will be telling the highlights of what they want in a bill, but then it'll be lawyers actually drafting everything up.
Right. And them just kind of proofing it and saying, explain this to me, right? Yeah. So people forget about that. Like, I mean, I forget about it all the time. I'm thinking about, well, what the hell does he know about Russia? And then I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. And then in terms of politics in Russia, that is not a legislative issue. That's for us, that's an administration issue. And we've got a Department of State, and we have I have no problem with career professionals being in those jobs, right? I don't have a problem with someone making government and public policy and things like that their jobs. They just shouldn't be elected officials.
Exactly. Elected people cannot have a career.
Right.
You can build up your career in government by getting hired to a state job and then moving up the corporate ladder, so to speak. But if you're an elected official, you should not have a career.
Right. That's what I would say.
Okay? It is not a career.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Uh,
I don't necessarily think a degree is. I mean, I think the requirement is you just got to have some common sense and some life's experience, and we kind of guarantee that based on at what age you can get into the various offices. I mean, not guarantee it, but we're I guess we're hoping. The challenge to me is those numbers haven't changed. Those ages haven't changed in a long time, right? And someone who was 25 years old back in 1800 or 1850 had a lot more life experience than someone that's 25 years old today, um, in terms of, let's say, hardships and benefits.
yeah, yeah.
But and then our life expectancy, right? So I don't. That's probably not something that's going to change. But if you think about, it's really interesting to go back and kind of take a look at the way politicians operated back then and now. I mean, there was
But that,
there was corruption then, and there was nonsense back then, and
oh,
fist
there's
fights.
always corruption. There's been
Right.
corruption for as long as the planet's existed.
But
Now,
it was
this
more
takes me back to
personal than systematic.
now that takes me back to something else though, because it's as you were saying, we rely on people's experience from being older, etc. And I believe that's a lot of why Trump was elected, because people believed that his business sense lent him a lot of experience on how to manage a country, that kind of thing. Now, and here I'm going back to my one major gripe with Trump, well, two really, which is the way he speaks and what he says. Which is, for example, you take the whole thing of how he started downplaying the virus when he said, "Oh, it's only 15 cases. Pretty soon it's going to be down to zero." And my problem with this is, yes, he's trying to convey hope. I understand that. Believe me, I do. But you can also display facts without generating a panic. Everybody's saying, "Oh, he was displaying hope. Would you prefer that he cause a panic?" No, he didn't need to cause a panic. He could present the facts without creating a panic. Okay, that's what presidents do. That's what they've done throughout history. Roosevelt didn't create a panic when World War II started. There was no panic. It was simply, we're going to war. There you go. They attacked Pearl Harbor. Off we go. Um, Ronald Reagan, he didn't create a panic with the Cold War. It's, look, the Russians are over there. They keep trying to send stuff over here. We're stopping them. That's it. That's the world. When Ebola came out, when the swine flu came out, Obama didn't create a panic. He presented the facts. Okay, and this is the major flaw that I see Trump having. He doesn't present the facts. He presents pretty words to try to make things look better, but those pretty words fall flat when the truth comes out, and that's a major issue here. When you have 15 cases, you can't simply go, "Oh, it's 15 cases. It's going to go to zero very quickly, and then it'll be gone, and nothing to worry about." No, you say, "We have 15 cases. We're watching them carefully. If there's any developments, we'll let you know. We hope that they'll go away soon, but we don't know." That's facts. Okay, and same thing's happening has happened throughout. "Oh, it'll be gone in the next couple of weeks. We're very good. We're over the top. We're doing great." No, you're not. You still have thousands of people dying every day.
Right. That's not his personality, though. Right. I mean, that's not going to happen. And I think that people have factored that in. People who are not
Guys like you
necessarily
and me,
look
we have factored it in. Guys like
right.
you and me, we have factored it
Right.
in, but we go back to the whole thing with this disinfectant. There's people that listen to him, hang on his every
Right.
word, and think whatever he says is gospel.
So what I ask is, look, before the corona virus pandemic started, okay, I would just ask people who would say Trump is bad, Trump is bad, Trump is bad. I say, how is he bad? Well, he's an obnoxious guy and he calls people names and all the rest. And I'm like, okay. But in terms of running the country as the chief executive officer of the country, what has he done good and what has he done bad? and would never get an answer. It was always this
No, I'll
emotional
tell you now, the
feeling thing.
economy in the U.S. was very good.
Right,
There's no doubting it.
right,
The unemployment was down. That's all good.
right.
He did good things. I
Yeah.
don't argue that. He
And
did
in
good
terms
things.
of foreign
I
policy, North Korea, he's
I
mitigated that
heavily
threat.
question his foreign policy. Yes, he did good things with some of the more aggressive countries, but at the same time, he alienated countries that were his allies.
Like who?
Uh, he started to alienate France. He
So,
started to
let
alienate
me
the
ask a question
UK.
about that. Did he alienate France or did he alienate Macron?
Uh,
What's
How
the
about those folks with the yellow
difference
vests?
in the
Did he
result?
alienate them?
sorry.
The folks with the yellow vests, did he alienate them?
Well, no, they wouldn't care. They were more worried about their jobs and the money they were getting paid.
Right. They would probably be voting for him over Macron.
It's
Or
possible. It's
right.
possible, but there's a problem with populism. Okay, and that's what Trump is relying on. He's very against globalism, and he's all for populism. Now,
I think he's for nationalism. I think populism is become like a dirty word, and I don't think it applies here.
call it nationalism
Uh,
then, because you
he
actually helped me with that word. Because nationalism, believe it or not, Hitler was of the Nationalist Party.
now see that it might have been the Nationalist Party, but there's a that whole thing with Hitler being a nationalist. Hitler was not.
No, I
Hitler was
agree.
not a nationalist. He was not out looking out for the best interest of his country and his people. He was looking out for his own best interests, and he wanted to
Correct,
continue to
but
expand and take over. I think Trump. My point. My thought is that Trump is saying, "Listen, the world is a big competition." Right, because we're now up an economy. You know,
but
think
it
of it.
doesn't have to be.
Well,
That's the
just
point I'm making. It doesn't have to be.
but so his point is we're gonna if we have competition and we compete on a level playing field, everybody can do better. It's when we're not playing by the same rules. I think
And I
what
agree.
I think what
I
he's
agree.
done with the deep state in the United States, what he's done with the mainstream media, he has also done with foreign relations and foreign policy and foreign governments.
I disagree there. I agree that everything should be on the same level playing field. Everybody should pay according to their means, or however you want to put it.
Their
For
same
example, you
on the
take
same schedule. I don't know if they pay according to their means. I mean, they.
well, you take, for example, you take Ireland, you take Iceland. Obviously, they can't pay into the UN the same as the US
Oh, right.
does.
In those kind of cases, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm talking about
Now,
foreign trade, right?
no, that's a different issue, and I'll get to that in a second. So you have the problem you have here is yeah, and even in foreign trade, the entire concept is America first, which means we're going to take everything we can. You see it with China. Yes, fair enough. China's been robbing everybody blind, and it's not just the U.S.
And so
Okay, this
China's
is
been saying China first forever, right?
obviously.
Right.
So, but that needs to change. But it's not just China or the U.S. It should be global. It should be
Right.
there should be an attempt, instead of just saying, "Oh, we're going to start taking more money from them because all that matters is us." No, it should be, okay, let's get together with the world and put together a plan to put in proper trade deals with the world, literally the world, not just one country or another. So everybody is getting the same benefits.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
but
mean,
what he's doing is, no, all that matters is America.
well, I think he's using what I'd call a. It's kind of like our common law legal system. It's an adversarial system, right? You've got someone saying you're guilty and someone saying I'm not guilty, or you did this and you owe me this, and no, I don't. And like you said, Ricardo, we come together, we put the evidence out, and we make a decision on that, right? I think what Trump's
But he,
attitude is two countries come together and they both argue and they use their strengths and their weaknesses and they come to an agreement. And then everybody does that. And if you don't like the agreement, you come back, you renegotiate or whatever. Things get out of hand. I think I truly believe that he's just trying to level the playing field. I don't think he's looking for any advantage. I've heard him say over and over again, I want China to be successful. I want Great Britain to be successful. I want France to be successful, but I don't want them to be successful off of taking advantage of America,
I agree. I agree
right?
completely.
I think that's all he's saying.
But he's literally made globalism into a bad word, and that's what globalism is. Really, it's everybody getting together and agreeing on stuff.
See, I think
Yeah.
globalism is much more nefarious than you think it is. I think that there are people who think we should have like one world government. And I
Honestly, I don't think it would be that horrible.
I think
I'm not saying I'd want it, but I don't think it would
I
be that
think
horrible.
the potential for corruption
But then
there
again, I'm
is
a big Star Trek fan.
magnified, yeah, multiple orders of magnitude.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't have a bone in that one. I'm a big Star Trek fan, so I don't see the issue just from seeing Star Trek. I don't know what the complexities of it would be, but
So we're going to model the
so I don't.
world over a fictional science fiction
Yeah,
genre.
look, it's I don't know the complexities of what would be involved. Obviously, everybody would want to take their piece, so it probably is a non-starter from the beginning, just like communism. Which communism, if you actually look at it, it's not communism. Americans take it to be a dictatorship, and it's not. It's just an idealism of everybody should have a fair share. There's
Right.
nothing
But
particular.
yeah, but no one's been able to implement it.
Oh, absolutely not. Communism is a utopian idea. It's impossible to implement.
Right.
There's always somebody that wants to, instead of going to work, they want to sit at home, and the other guy has to pay for it.
Right.
There's always going to be that. Communism is utopian. It's impossible to implement. True socialism, same thing. But that doesn't mean they're evil. They're just ideologies. And if you hear Trump or a lot of Americans in general, and I'm generalizing completely, a lot of you guys think these concepts are evil, absolute evil, and they equate dictatorships. They don't. A dictatorship is one thing. The social politics on which it's relying is something else entirely different. You can have a dictatorship in a democracy. It can happen.
Well, sure, but so I don't think we think that, like, for example, the EU is evil, right? We just think it's maybe stupid, right? That you in Ireland or Great Britain are going to let someone in The Hague or wherever the EU headquarters is. It's not The Hague, is it?
No, I think it's in Brussels.
Brussels, right? That's right, Brussels. The World Court or whatever's in Hague.
Yeah.
Tell you, I mean, virtually everything about your life, control everything about your life. I mean,
Not
it's
really, because if you look at it, like we have what it's about, we have pretty much the same traffic laws in all European countries. That's not a bad thing. It means as we drive across borders, we don't have to worry about it. We know we're on a highway, speed limit's 100 kilometers an hour or 120
right,
or whatever it is, and there's exceptions to every rule, obviously.
right.
We know that there's that we have a common monetary value. We all use the euro. We know that there's established laws that if I get fired, I have certain protections.
Right. What about things though like free speech,
We have free speech.
hate speech?
No, hate speech is generally looked down upon. It's not exactly illegal, but it's fairly frowned upon.
What about them telling you you have to take refugees or migrants from somewhere?
No countries. I know that there was some talk about that, but it was an agreement. It wasn't anybody specifically saying your country has to take migrants. It was an agreement between all countries, and all countries were actually volunteering to take migrants.
Yeah, I think it was a little more. There was a little more pressure than that. I don't think it was
There was
volunteers.
pressure because a lot of the migrants were coming in through Greece, and Greece was being stuck with them until all the other countries could agree who was taking who. Okay, that's where the pressure was coming from.
Right.
Greece and Turkey, all the migrants were coming through there, and they were stuck there until everybody else could agree what the hell to do with them.
Right.
Because obviously, you can't just let them loose throughout Europe. You have to coordinate so that because otherwise,
Right.
all that would happen is they'd go to the first country, and all of a sudden, you'd have 10,000, 50,000 migrants just settling in there and never moving forward, and all the other countries were sitting pretty.
Right. And I think Turkey
So
and Greece basically told the EU, you guys got to figure it out and fix it,
exactly,
or we're
and they
just
were
releasing
right,
them and you're in trouble.
exactly,
Yeah.
and they were right to do so. Okay.
Yeah.
And
So that wasn't people volunteering out of the goodness of their heart. They were pressured into it under duress from those countries.
well, it wasn't
That
really
was a
the rest, because, for
negotiation.
example, you take Portugal and Ireland; those migrants would never reach there because we're on the west coast. But these countries accepted taking in migrants anyway.
Yeah,
The same with
they would have made
UK.
it there. Trust me, they'll make it
But
everywhere
it would have been
if allowed.
in an agreement. It's pretty much the same as what happens in your Congress. Like you have Republicans and Democrats, and they're arguing back and forth, and the party with majority is going to try to pressure the other party. Right? It's pretty much the same thing.
Sure.
You guys eventually
Sure.
come to a compromise,
Right.
which happens every time you guys have a budget.
Right.
Okay.
If we have a budget.
Eventually, countries come to a compromise. That's called diplomacy.
Right. But that's
So
not
it's not-
all volunteering. There is an antagonistic, adversarial conversation going on,
Sure
and
there is, because some countries have less capacity than others, and
Right.
some countries simply don't want to take in migrants, that kind of thing. I'm sure. But it comes down to diplomacy. It's trying to convince those countries to take them. Nobody's
Right.
actually forcing them. No country can be forced to do anything. Like if you take Poland or Germany or something, if you tried to force them to anything, they just say no, piss off.
I think there's the two levels of governing is, I think the potential for corruption and
But you have it there. You have two levels. You have state and you have federal.
now I'm talking about two levels of government. I'm talking about like having a level above our federal government. I mean, because you've got local governments and regional governments and
Well, that's
things
it.
of that
All you're
nature.
doing is adding a level. It's personally, I don't think it would be that complicated.
Yeah.
It might not work. I agree, but like, I don't think it would be as horrible as everybody makes it out to be.
But it hasn't worked.
Canada and Europe function that way. It doesn't seem too horrible. It doesn't look too bad.
Well, technically, Canada belongs to the UK, if I recall correctly.
That's what I'm saying. So they have that other level of government above their own.
No, they don't, Shane. I mean, they have no. There's no. The only thing they claim as being part of the Commonwealth, and so the monarchy, they look at it as, but there's no, they don't have to go anywhere in the UK to get approval for legislation or anything.
UK doesn't have any legislative power.
Yeah, no power whatsoever. Australia.
Like I said, I'm not
Same thing with Australia. Yeah.
I'm not a political expert.
But they're part of the
Surprised you picked that up.
they're part of the Commonwealth, and
Gotcha.
all right.
No, it's just on paper.
All right, so we're at an hour and 44 minutes here by my Zoom clock. I mean, we can continue to have a conversation, or we can schedule
we
to.
could go on all night.
Yeah, I know, but it's great. I mean, I think this is really good. Some really interesting conversation, and we should do it again if you guys would like to do it. Maybe we wait a month and do it.
No issue.
See. It would be interesting to do it again in a month or so and see what happens with some of these states opening and things like that. And Ricardo, what I would say to you is, you know more about what's going on here politically and with the coronavirus than most Americans do.
To be fair, I was partially raised there. I was in Reno, Nevada. Spent high school there, primary school.
Beautiful place.
So,
I mean,
not so great
I'm not talking about necessarily the city itself, but that area and the mountains and the lake and things like that.
Yeah, Lake Tahoe. Good place. Good memories.
You see, with the coronavirus, I may not have the political expertise for it, but I do understand the science of it. And, with all these lockdown protesters and everybody rushing to get everything back open, my concern is this virus has about a 2-week lifespan outside of the body, if it's outside of the body. So basically, what that means.
Define that.
What's that?
Define 2 weeks outside of the body. You talking about surfaces and stuff?
On surfaces, right?
Yeah, that's not the numbers I've heard.
It's less than that.
Is it less than that? I thought it was about 2 weeks.
No, it's considerably less than that. It's a few days.
3 days, 3 days or less, I think.
Is it outside of the body?
Yeah. On flat surfaces, on porous surfaces, even less.
Is the incubation time?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Incubation time.
And so I mean, if I really feel like if we could just all maintain the social distancing and everything for a long enough time, for a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, if everybody did it,
That's it.
then this would start subsiding.
I mean, literally, if everybody did that for let's say 3 or 4 weeks,
yeah,
the virus would be gone because there would be no host for it, and it needs a host, right? It can't produce its own.
Well, that's the thing, because like the problem we have right now is reopening states. You're allowing people who are possibly asymptomatic. Okay, I'm not even talking to people that are sick. I'm talking to
Right.
people that are asymptomatic to be walking around and spreading the virus. That's a problem we have there. Okay,
But if you
and
do the social distancing thing and you do the masks, you mitigate the risk for that. You don't eliminate it, but you
Mark,
certainly mitigate.
have a look at those protests that happened like in Michigan or
Oh, I know,
Virginia or
I know,
whatever.
I know.
Like, and then you have President Trump coming out and saying those are good people.
right.
And like you can't. You're essentially you're allowing that to happen. You're saying it's okay for that to happen.
Well,
At the very least, I'd expect them. Look, guys, you can protest, but observe social distancing.
wear a mask.
How do you feel about these protests, Mark?
I'm not a big protest guy, right? I mean, either way, I kind of think it doesn't mean that much. It's for press and all, and you can get that on social media or something now. The situation up in Michigan, though, the situation where people are protesting, it's really kind of state specific. If you look at what Gretchen Whitmer is doing up there, it's clear that what she's doing is trying to qualify to be Joe Biden's vice president. She's doing some really crazy stuff up there in terms of what's really going on. And
what has she done that was so crazy?
well, she continues to push this total lockdown out for the entire state when they don't have the kind of infection rates outside of Detroit, as I understand it, that would call for that. And I'm not talking about a full-scale opening. Just, something reasonable like most states are doing, like we're doing here.
But Mark, what do you do then when you have people like in Chicago? Chicago's there, right? Is that or Detroit?
Chicago's in Illinois.
Chicago's in Illinois.
That's right. That's right. So let's say you have somebody from a big city that is in lockdown, and then you have a bunch of counties that are open, and then you have those people in the big city that say, "Well, hell, screw this! I'm gonna go visit my cousins that live over in the next county over that's open." And he's asymptomatic, and all of a sudden he's spreading it over there. To me, it makes sense that if a state is locked down, it stays locked down. Now, my understanding of some of this, and I don't know if that's the case with Michigan or some of the other states that were having protests, but my understanding is one of the big issues, and which Trump commented about, was that part of the lockdown, part of the reason for the protests was that gun stores were not being considered as an essential
business,
an essential item, an essential business.
Yeah.
So they weren't allowed to stay open.
Yeah,
This
that's
was
not
one of the things that was being protested.
Yeah,
And
no, I don't think that's the case. I think those are open. They're marked as essential. But so, for example,
No,
I
think it was Virginia that they had closed.
Virginia for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Virginia for sure.
That's one of those cases that I'm thinking, why is it essential? Why do people need guns in a lockdown? Like, the people that are going to be buying guns are the people that already have guns. So what's essential about it?
People want to exercise their Second Amendment right. They
can. They have the right to keep and bear arms. They just don't have the right to go and buy them during a lockdown.
Yeah, so getting back to Michigan though, and
I
I could go either way on that one. I mean, if you're right, but I mean, there were some people that are worried that this was going to get crazy and out of hand, and that food shortages and stuff like that. So they wanted to be able to protect themselves. But getting back to Michigan, she did things like within a store. So let's say you're going to open a hardware store because people need building supplies or they need to replace a water heater that breaks or whatever. But she had them cordon off areas of the store so people couldn't do things like buy garden supplies, right? So it was almost as if she was intentionally trying to piss people off who were in quarantine who said, hey, you know what? I'm not a big gardener, and I usually pay someone to do it, but shoot, I'm home for the next 3 weeks. I'm going to become a gardener. I'm going to do my own beds. I'm going to plant my own flowers or get ready to plant my own flowers. I'm going to plant a garden. And she literally said, these departments in these stores are not essential. She made that decision, right? The other thing she did, and the reason they were protesting is because she's a Democratic governor, but she's got a Republican legislature, a GOP majority legislator who were voting to slowly open the state. And she said, I'm not going to allow it. That's what they were like, wait a minute, you can't do that. Our legislators, the people we chose to represent us are saying you should do it. And you're saying you're not going to do it because she's got the administrative force, right? The police work for her, the state police, and all the rest. That's what
she's essentially the president of the state.
Correct. Chief executive officer of the state. Correct.
Yeah, so she does have veto power.
She has veto power on the legislation, but that she didn't veto this. She just said, "I'm not going to do it."
Yeah, but let's look at it differently then. Trump said the governors decide when the state's open. Okay, and he gave them a plan. A lot of these protests happened within a couple of days of those plans being launched. Okay,
right.
And with no chance of those states being within the parameters of the plan yet. Okay, like my view is, I agree with her on the basis that if you can't open the entire state, you shouldn't open, because there's going to be leaks between counties, between cities, etc., and the virus will resurge. Okay, that'll happen. Absolutely.
Yeah, but that's fine. Okay, that point, let me say I'll give you that point. But the fact that there were stores open and people going in the store already, in fact, by closing down those departments, she was having the same amount of people that might go there in less space, which could lead to more contagion.
That's ridiculous, and I can't find logic in it.
Right. No, it's ridiculous.
Unless
I disagree
space issues or something like that, unless there's space issues and it was impossible to maintain social distances in those specific departments, which we see in some places. Like there's stores here in Ireland where you'd have like the main floor, which is open and everything is hunky-dory, and then you'd have departments which are enclosed in separate areas and wouldn't have a lot of space.
Right.
So I could understand that kind of scenario, but otherwise I don't see a reason for it. And that I agree with you. Look,
I agree that what you're saying is ridiculous, what she did with the stores. But is the proper metered response to that to show up at the government building fully armed? With,
what is that? Why
if that's,
is that the proper metered response?
I think they were just to show, it was basically a show of, you're not going to tell us what to do. Like, you're not going to be able to do this without due process, so to speak, right? Due political process. And to show that people are serious.
The police officers' faces, literally, like they no masks and getting up in their faces, screaming at the police officers. Now that was just wrong in my view. That's not civilized behavior.
Yeah, so I'm not going to disagree that some of that behavior was not good, but that behavior. So I had a Twitter, let's call her associate, who was there.
Yes, Eddie.
And she took videos, and there was very little of that going on. And those people were like either psycho or plants or both. That there was very, very little of that going on in the whole scheme of things. So the media once again will pull out because they've got a preconceived notion of what they want things to look like. Pull that out. If you go to her Twitter feed and you look at the video she took and the picture she took, it was a vastly different situation than what you saw in the media. Just like there's a hospital or a health complex up in Michigan that was highlighted on the CBS morning show, which is one of our morning shows. I'm sure you have a Good Morning Ireland or something like that. So, and they literally staged a crowd at the testing hut, right? The testing tent that was outside. They had to stage it because there were like two people that actually came by for real tests while they were doing this, and it screwed things up because the tests take a while, right? And they were holding things up. And CBS came out, or not CBS, the hospital came out and basically said, yes, we work with CBS to stage this today. They basically admitted to it, the board of the hospital. So you've got a lot of this stuff going on, Ricardo, that you don't hear about because the mainstream media doesn't report on it, right? Americans who are not that politically interested or informed, they take their half hour of news in the evening from a CNN or someone who positions it in a certain way, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's terrible."
Look, that is all a problem with the entire news system. Like again, it's like Shane was saying earlier. That happens on both sides. You'll have fabricated stories on both sides.
But much more so because of the size of that media complex on our left than on our right. Much more
I
so.
would argue. I don't know the numbers, so I'm not going to argue that point. Yeah. I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they will double down. Like when you find irrefutable evidence, they'll double down and basically say, "Yeah, we see the evidence, but we still disagree." It's like you should be impartially presenting the story and the facts from both sides, but they don't do it. And so we've gotten to have a culture here, I think, where many people are cynical because they just can't figure out what the best source is for getting to the truth of the facts.
But the thing is, they should be cynical of everything, and they're selectively cynical is what we see a lot of times. Like I've seen situations where you see facts presented, particularly on Twitter, you see this, where you see somebody presenting facts, and it's an identical story, okay, to present it anywhere else. It's just facts. It's man shot, whoever.
Right.
And they'll come and say, "Oh, that's coming from ABC News or CNN. I don't believe it."
Right.
I literally had a post a couple of days ago, which was it was because of those guys Louisiana that shot the black guy that was running.
Georgia.
You aware of that story?
Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia.
Yeah.
So that story, somebody posted on Twitter, and the link they had was from ABC News. Somebody said straight off, "That's fake news." And all I had to do was go, Fox News, here it is. Same story, same exact story, written the same way because they had actually copied it from ABC News. Posted, here you go. Oh, okay, I see it now.
Right.
And that's silly. That's just silly.
Right. But that's the but the reason people are cynical, this is a chicken or an egg kind of thing. You know, are the people cynical because the people have forced the media into being biased, or are the people cynical because the media is biased and they've seen it so many times that and we're so polarized because of that they immediately default to that's got to be fake news, right? I mean, I default to everything being fake news until I can validate it from multiple sources that appear to be credible.
But it comes down to common sense. That's all it comes down to. It's people using common sense, and a lot of people simply have let it rust or something because
we have a huge shortage of that.
I'd say that we've got a huge shortage of common sense, and I think we've also got a huge shortage of curiosity.
Yeah, that too. It's like critical thinking, really. Like,
right, critical thinking is a better way to put it.
Good this time.
Yeah. Shane's frozen. That's a good pick there, Shane. No, that's good.
Well, as long as you can hear him, it's fine.
I don't know if we can. Like, He'll be back, though.
I'll commonly post facts, just pure facts. And it's like what happened with you. I'll get called a troll. I'll get called a bot. I'll get told that I'm a sheep, this and that. And all I post is facts. Okay? I don't post opinions because I don't have an opinion overall over pretty much anything. It's I try to base it on facts. So I'll comment on a tweet, say this happened before, etc. I don't generally say, I think he's bad because he's Republican or bad because he's Democrat. I honestly don't care about the party. So I'll try to stick to facts, numbers, wherever I can. Like people just don't take the time to think. And like and you see a lot, like especially on Trump's Twitter feed. You have that sexology doctor. I'm sure you've seen her a few times. You have some guy called RD. You have basically you have a bunch of profiles that just go on and automatically post just the silliest stuff.
Right.
Like anything Trump posts, anything, absolutely anything. Okay, this sexology doctor will come in. She'll be the first or second post, and she'll say, "Oh, we love what you're doing." Anything he posts, he could post the most ridiculous thing on the planet, and they'll come up and they're literal yes men.
Yeah. But there are also people that do exactly the same in reverse.
Oh, absolutely. You have some
Right.
guy that's got like a picture of some famous guy in there. As soon as a Trump tweet comes out, he'll come in and say, "Imagine being this silly" or something, some crap like that.
Right.
And yeah, you have it on both sides, and people just need to calm down, relax. Like your entire country is being divided down party lines by people who don't bother to think. It's that simple. Like
I don't.
anybody who could,
I won't agree with you on that. I think we're
well,
divided
it's
on
because
party lines. We're divided on party lines because of the way that our political parties have decided to position themselves.
Oh, I agree, but there's hell. Hang on, let me clarify my statement. Then, you can be divided along party lines just fine. It's okay for two parties to have opposing political views. That's perfectly fine. The problem is, though, that division is becoming aggressive. Okay, you literally have people
But
bullying and
right.
calling names and this and that, left, right, and center.
So,
Okay,
first of all, Twitter isn't the real world. Okay.
obviously, yeah.
And so
And we can
there's a
see
great
here we've had a perfectly civil conversation
right.
that didn't start that civil on Twitter.
I don't think it was uncivil. It was
Oh, no,
just
it wasn't uncivil. It was just a little bit
aggressive,
aggressive. Yeah,
assertive. Yeah.
yeah.
No, but what I was going to say is there's a study that was done a year or two ago. I think it's called the Hidden Tribes of America, and I can send you a link via DM. And I found it very fascinating because it basically says that there are 14%, I believe, of the United States who are people who are on the far left and the far right. There's 8% on the left and 6% on the right. And they are the people that you aren't going to change their mind no matter what you do, no matter what facts you present. And these are the crazy people, I contend, on Twitter. Everybody else will have their mind changed. And if you look at the profile of the people, they kind of segment them based on what they studied and what they found. The differences in beliefs on things is not that far apart. I mean, the further you get over to that 8 and that 6%, the more they are. And some of it has to do with age and some of it has to do with geography. But by and large, they're just normal people trying to live their life and kind of believe the same things in terms of how to live a life. And it's that craziness that gets exploited and reported and talked about, and manipulated. Yeah, I would suggest to you that I haven't seen a sexologist or sex doctor that replies on Trump's tweet, but I would contend that that's probably some kind of a bot or troll account that's been set up to do that.
Probably.
Yeah.
Now, the issue, the only issue, the last issue I want to talk about because it's getting late as well. Like, wouldn't you agree that the president should be a unifying force? Like, he is the president of the U.S., so he should be a unifying force for the people of America. So it doesn't help his cause when he tweets about do nothing Democrats, calls people names, finds those little nicknames for the various people. He can do all that with class. He can do all that and call people by their names without insulting them. It really presents a horrible image. And here I say to the world that he has become quite simply an online bully, which actually goes against the campaign his wife's presenting for the Be campaign.
So I have a little different perspective on that. Could the message be better. Absolutely. Every one of us could have better messages when we do public speaking or we put ourselves out there. But someone raised this with me, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. They were like, and they weren't necessarily a Trump fan. They were like, I've kind of looked, and when he bullies someone, it's usually after they've taken a personal ad hominem swipe at him. That he doesn't just make it up out of the blue.
No, I don't. I
That
don't
it's a
think he does.
competitive fighting kind of thing. He gets called some name by someone and he's like, okay, I'm going to come up with a better name, right? They made fun of my orange hair or my weight or whatever. I'm going to make fun of their lack of
Mark, he's the
energy or whatever.
president.
But he's a human being too, right?
Yeah, but he should be above that. The thing is, he's actually a role model for the kids of America, and
See,
a lot of times for
I don't
kids of the
agree with
world.
that. I don't agree with that. I mean, in terms
Well,
of a president, I didn't hire him to be a role model for anything. I hired him to
no,
run the
nobody
country.
nobody
Right.
hires him to be the role model, but he becomes that by being the president.
I
Like
don't. I
kids
don't.
want to be the president of the U.S. Okay,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
they
know if
see
that's
him,
true anymore.
and he normalizes bullying, and that does happen. You see, like America has always been a kind of dog eat dog kind of country, where violence has always been very prominent as like you just look at American football, for example, and it's a violent sport, and
What about
America
rugby?
has all. It is as well. Don't get me wrong, but you don't see the same level of I don't want to say just patriotism, but it's fanatical patriotism in other countries of the world. Um, and namely, you don't see the level of common day aggressiveness from other peoples of the world as well. It's more prominent. I don't say it doesn't exist, but it's very much more prominent in the U.S.
I would say
Uh,
that I've traveled a lot. Okay. I would say we've got a fairly, um, we're not going
well,
to let,
I'm not saying we
we're
don't.
going to probably, if someone confronts us or does something we don't agree with, we're going to speak up as opposed to not.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
The only
But
country I found that was a little
oftentimes,
more, I found one of the countries I've been to that's a little more aggressive than us is Russia.
yeah,
Folks in Russia are
that
not afraid to call you out on anything.
no, but the thing is, oftentimes, especially in America, it goes very quickly from somebody speaking to you to physical violence, whereas in other countries it'd be much more common to have a more prolonged attempt at civility before any kind of physical violence erupts.
Yeah,
And you see
but
that a lot.
we don't have that much physical violence. I don't think we have that much more physical violence in that regard in terms of social interactions than you do. I think it's
No,
about probably
there
about the
happens to be.
same.
I still have family in the states. Like I have my half brother there and my mother. I'm continuously getting on to him about this. Like half his language, it's that ghetto
Right,
language kind of speech that they use. Younger generations, obviously,
right,
where everything is about you do this, I'm gonna kick your ass. You do that, I'm gonna kick your ass. It's all about kicking ass, and
right.
it's a very kind of violent type of language that is commonly used in the States, which you don't see very much outside of there.
I don't know. I was I used to do some athletic competitions where I traveled to um, England and the Netherlands, Holland, and I hanging out with those folks and hanging out in the bars and all the rest. I think you need to spend a little more time here. I don't think it's as that. I just don't. I will tell you that I spent a lot of time in Italy. In Italy, there's a lot of bluster, but virtually never any kind of like
Oh yeah, yeah.
physical. They just there's a machismo, an image, but
Oh yeah,
it
yeah.
never results in anything. And if it were to, they'd be like,
Yeah,
it just
I
wouldn't
think it comes a
be
lot from
acceptable.
this whole warrior image that Americans have, that they're the warriors of the world, they're the police of the world, the military of the world, etc. And I think it comes a lot from that. Now, fair enough, you guys had to fight for your independence, etc. You've had your civil wars, you've been involved in every major war in the world. in the recent 200-300 years. But
Not every war. There's been a lot of wars we haven't been in.
oh yeah,
There are so many wars. That's the other thing people don't realize. There are wars going on all around the world right now that people are unaware
oh
of.
yeah. Look, you've got constant conflicts between India, Pakistan. Not even talking about the majority
The Tamils.
of Middle
I
East.
mean, you can go down the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Americans have been involved in a lot of wars, and there's this general concept that America is the police of the world, which personally I disagree with. But,
Yeah, we don't feel that way, and our government
no,
doesn't feel that way.
I think your government does feel that way. Is the point? Your government does feel that way.
I
That
don't.
they have
Trump
the right
doesn't feel
to-
that way. He wants to have nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that.
If that were the case, he wouldn't have gotten involved in with North Korea, for example. Or Venezuela, or I think it was Venezuela. He was constantly going back and forth with Venezuela as well.
Yeah, that's not policeman of the world. That's yeah.
I'm not saying
I think
those
there's a
are
difference
nice
between.
countries,
We
don't
weren't
get me
trying to
wrong.
control anybody. I mean, first of all, nuclear weapons are an issue for us. Okay, the North Korean thing was us. I mean, we didn't get serious about that until he started to be able to lob those things and hit American
But
soil.
that's a point. You see, that's the thing I don't get.
That's
Americans
us.
are very quick to ensure that no other country can have that kind of weapon. But the only world that has ever actually deployed atomic weapons is the U.S.
Right.
By following logic, now just accompany me here, but following the logic, if anybody should be afraid of anybody, the world should be afraid of America. Because you have the largest military, you have the most nuclear weapons, and we know from history you're not afraid to use them.
Well, we don't. We've never used the nuclear weapons other
Well,
than.
you use atomic, so.
Well, we use them though, to end the Second World War, essentially.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, don't question.
Everybody
no
was
question
was for that.
No
Like it
question.
wasn't like
No
it was
question.
like I mean, and you do know we got called like we were being begged to come into that
I know,
conflagration,
absolutely.
right?
Don't get me wrong. I
Because
understand the logic
Germany
behind
was
it.
was kicking ass, right?
But it's ironic that the U.S. doesn't allow any country that doesn't ally itself with American policy. They don't want those countries to have those kind of weapons.
See, I would say that what we don't want is nuclear proliferation, and the reason we've got so many nuclear weapons is because of the arms race with Russia. That's why we've got them, and many times we've tried to de-escalate that competition, and there's been a lot of cheating on that from the Russians.
But don't you think that if you have weapons, other countries have a right to have them?
No, not
Right.
something like weapons of mass destruction like that. Because, so for example, Great Britain is a nuclear country, right? Or
Right.
England is or the UK is
Yeah.
a nuclear country. I'm not too worried about someone pushing the button inadvertently
Correct.
there, or France, right?
Correct.
Or Israel, who won't tell us whether they do or don't, but we know they do. But Pakistan, that concerns me, right? They concern me. Very unstable government, and that's problematic.
What about if a country like Brazil decided to have them?
First of all, I don't think they would, and second of all, I mean, I think I'd be I just think we need to get to the point where we don't have any, as opposed to
Oh, no,
having
don't get
more
me
people
wrong.
have
I agree
them.
completely.
But I'd say
But
no.
it's-
I mean, I would say no to anybody. There's no
But
need.
But that's just it. It's hypocritical when the U.S. has the most nuclear weapons in the world to say other countries can't have them just because.
I don't think we have the
Not
most. I
right.
think Russia has the most, actually.
They have the biggest. You have the most.
Yeah. Well, it depends on how you look at it. Again, per capita. Yeah. So
Pure quantity of nuclear missiles, America has more than Russia.
yeah.
Size-wise, Russia has the biggest nuclear bomb.
Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, if that's hypocritical, I don't want to see nuclear proliferation, then I'll be called a hypocrite on that subject.
Fair enough.
I mean, I can't just say anything other than that. I just think it's it's something we need to get rid of as opposed to
No, don't
being
get me wrong.
encouraging
I agree
elsewhere.
completely. Nukes should not exist. Period. I think it's a bad idea from
Yeah,
day one.
really bad idea.
They shouldn't exist. I just don't agree with the policy that American can have them, nobody else can.
Right.
I don't agree with that policy.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree on that one. I mean, it's not only
But
us that has them, and it's not only us that is saying we don't want someone else to have them. I mean,
oh yeah,
everybody
no,
that's got them is saying no one else should have
yeah,
them, except maybe some of the, maybe Russia or Pakistan who've tried to
yeah,
help, but
China.
yeah, or China, Anyway, okay.
All right, Mark.
Shayna, obviously, I maybe he said he was leaving. I didn't know, but anyway, it's a great conversation, Ricardo. We'll have to do it again.
It was.
I'll let you know when
Very
I get it
enjoyable.
uploaded. Not many people are going to watch it because it's 2 hours and 17 minutes long. I might split it up into segments. But there's some good stuff. And I like the fact that you're not an American and we could have this conversation and you're very, very, very knowledgeable about what's going on here.
I thought it was a very good conversation, and
Yeah.
it's good to talk to somebody without just having the common threads thrown back at you.
Right. I've got the common threads. I just won't throw them back at you. I know them, right? We all know them, but
Yeah.
I'd prefer to be able to have some kind of a conversation where interesting ideas get exchanged and
That's it. Because
we try to learn something as opposed to prove
the
we're
world
right.
needs to evolve, and just going back to throwing insults back and forth, it's not gonna happen that way. So.
Right. Okay, great. Have a good evening.
All right. You too.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Talk to you
Yep.
soon.
Bye-bye.